everyone goes through this same, what do you mean my technical skills don't get me any further? Wait, what? What do you mean? I have to learn something completely different? But I've spent the last 10, 15 years getting really good at technology. And it's very important. So biggest piece of advice is don't, when you get really good at something,
Mhm.
don't think that your problem is you don't know enough and so you're going to go and learn other fields and other stuff. Don't. You're good. You're good at what you do. Keep being good at what you do. But realize that learning another technology just makes you incrementally more valuable.
Hi, friends, and I'm really excited about this episode with Vin. Vin is entrepreneur himself, author, and also someone who has been, in this journey about the proliferation of data science. So we have been connected over the last 7, 8 years, and I'm really excited to, delve deeper in his journey and learn about his aspiration. And in this journey, he has built a organization. He works with several clients and consults them on AI strategies. So really looking forward to it. Thanks, Vin, for taking time out of your schedule and looking forward to the session.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. So, let's start with how you got into data science and maybe some early days of your education, and then how did you get into data science? Let's start from there.
So I went to school to get into data science, to get into AI, to go work for Microsoft and build really advanced
Mhm.
models. Unfortunately, I did that in the 90s.
Oh
And
wow!
that was a very first little hype cycle. We talk
Correct.
about hype cycles like they're new, and no, unfortunately, we've been doing these forever. So I graduate, no one wants to hire me, least of all Microsoft.
Mhm.
I had to work in more traditional software engineering roles. I worked up from doing basic PC installation. That was the first technical job I had,
Wow.
was installing PCs, building websites, doing database administration. Went to customer sites in my first corporate job, installed their software, installed their platforms in-house, worked directly face to face with clients. And that was really important for me because I got to see firsthand what happens when you promise to do something with software and you don't deliver it.
Wow.
It,
and,
it was
and
it was really a shaping experience.
Wow. And just going a bit deeper. So when did how did that thought occur? Because in 90s, I
Mhm.
mean, while there might be a hype cycle, but that would still not be the popular choice, right? I mean, even
Nope.
computer science would have been in its early days. So how did that happen?
Well, I was going to do civil engineering because,
Okay.
you do whatever your dad does. And dad did civil engineering. So what am I going to do? Be a civil engineer.
Mhm.
But the first time I wrote code, I was 12.
Okay. Hmm.
And I should have figured out that I kind of loved it. I enjoyed being able to create something in a virtual environment and getting that computer to do something for you. There's something, I don't know, that captivated me about that. I went to college, spent my first year thinking I was going to do civil engineering, took one class in programming and said, "What am I doing? I love this. I'm going to
Wow.
do programming."
Mhm.
So I
And which
switched to
year was
programming.
this?
That was 94, 95.
Wow. Okay. So you originally went for civil engineering, but with your first session, you decided to start shifting towards computer engineering. And how did this Microsoft boot camp or whatever it was? How did that happen?
They gave the school I was going to $1 million grant to do computer vision.
Oh wow.
And this was not the it's not the computer vision we're doing today. Let's just put it that way.
So
It
this
was
was
really
symbolic.
remedial.
This
Yep,
was symbolic.
really remedial. We were building our filters by hand. There
Okay.
was no layer that was handling the filter component. We were building it.
Right.
So I got to see under the covers, which at the time, that was the only way to teach. But now we gloss over so much of that.
Yeah.
that when it finally came back around, I had a different perspective because I had to learn the remedial version of data science and machine learning because that's all we had. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't have anything else back then. So when I got into the field in finally in 2000, 2010, 2011 is when it really started to not just be BI anymore.
Hmm.
There was a machine learning component to it. And that's where I started at the ground floor, really building very, very simplistic statistical models. I got a chance to work with scientists on scientific research. And they taught me a different type of rigor.
Hmm.
They explained, okay, so statistical, that's awesome. But if you can't explain your model, we can't use it.
Interesting.
Wait. What do you mean you can't use it? I'm using this great deep learning thing that, right? But if we can't prove it works, we can't use it. So science is held to a different standard of proof. And that's where a lot of my journey really came from, is
Hmm.
looking at, so we have data science on one side, we have traditional machine learning approaches, and it's held to such a small, low bar.
Yeah.
And then there's science, which has this much higher bar, much higher evidentiary standard.
Hmm.
And I started figuring out, how do we bridge the two? When do we need to? When
Hmm.
can I get away with in business just delivering something that I know it's not perfect, but delivers value? So who cares? If it delivers value, it's good enough. But
Hmm.
then there's other times where I need to be more rigorous. I need to deliver something that's more reliable. How do you know when to deliver a quick and easy solution, when to deliver a more reliable solution? How do you justify the cost? And that's what ended up taking me from the technical component of the domain to the leadership and eventually to the strategy side, because it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
This isn't, it becomes increasingly expensive.
It
So
is.
someone has to write that check. Someone has to buy in. Someone has to be part of accepting we have problems big enough to spend money and solve with machine learning and
Mhm.
do it rigorously. And
And
that's what ended up kind of transitioning me from technical to strategy.
and during this time, were you working in a job, or you were already consulting with someone?
My first, I would call it a really simplistic analytics projects, were those were in corporate America. 2012, I got laid off
Okay.
and really overnight created what became V Squared.
Okay.
Went out, grabbed the first client. It was a side gig that
Hmm.
suddenly went from side consulting practice to, oh, I need a client fast.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
that's when the business formed. So I did the first few, I would say the first few, and it was more BI analytics.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, in 2008, we talk about data science, but we were, nah, that wasn't data science.
It
That
isn't.
was basic analysis. That was BI. That was warehousing. That was,
Correct.
wasn't really data science. And I'd say 2012 was when I first did a data science project and
Mhm.
did it, actually delivered models to production.
Okay, interesting. And what were those early models like? What kind of challenges did you face at that time? Because I mean, personally, in 2012, I remember installed R on my machine, and there was no place to figure out the challenges I was facing. So can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yep. I didn't build my first model in Python until 2017.
Okay.
We built
Yeah.
it in everything else. I mean, I've built models in C, C++, Java. I built them in
Wow.
C sharp. I mean, I've built models in C sharp. I think that's a badge of honor. I've
Mhm.
actually done it in a language that most people have never touched.
Never done.
And
Yeah.
and it was, there wasn't any, there were no libraries except for the scientific modeling libraries. That was all we had.
Yeah.
That's why SAS was such a popular choice, was because SAS had all the libraries. It was kind of the, I guess
Correct.
it was the old school Python, because
Yeah.
it had all of the scientific functions and all of the scientific libraries. C had it too. A
Mhm.
lot of the, the really hardcore weather models and those types of things were built in C.
Mhm.
Many of the, like, I worked in supply chain, a lot of stuff there was in C because it's efficient. It was
Yeah.
the thing that you could actually get running on what was, what passed for the cloud back then, and
Mhm.
what you could actually get running and what you could do model development, model training, and deploy and serve inference. You
Yeah.
had to, we were kind of going back to that old school. You don't have enough memory, you don't have enough compute, so you have to optimize everything. And that's why we used C and C++ because they were easier to optimize. They
Correct.
worked better in cloud environments. It was just it was easier to scale. A lot of benefits to it that now, we don't really not quite the same calculation, but yeah, it was technology limitations. Nobody had data at any scale outside of massive companies.
Mhm.
So if you weren't working at a very large company, you couldn't do data science. There was no data there to do it with.
Yeah.
So the only clients I could get were large companies. And
Wow.
that's where I began was with
Mhm.
larger companies. And it wasn't really until 2016, 2017 that small and mid-sized businesses started approaching me and saying, "Hey, what can you do for us? What kind of so started working with small and mid-size at that point. Got a lot of experience in what I would call the real world, where there are budgetary constraints and where there are time limitations and where people are very, very concerned about whether or not you're delivering on time. Where I'd say big corporate America, not quite as much. If
Mhm.
they throw $5 million at a project and it doesn't work out, they kind of go,
Yeah.
it's a, yeah, that, meh, that's all right. Whereas a
Correct.
small, mid-sized business, that's a totally different story. That'll get you fired.
Correct. Correct. But just double clicking on that period, so 2012, you mentioned you got laid off, to
Mhm.
2016, where, data science started to proliferate, you started getting multiple clients. During this period, I mean, how was it? And I'm presuming you were the salesperson, you were the data scientist, you were the
Yep,
everything
I'm
which
the
each
everything.
squad
Yes.
needed. So,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
can you share that journey?
It was interesting because, being the person who committed to the sale itself and then having to deliver, being
Hmm.
part of the delivery team too, built up a team of data scientists and some software engineers around me.
Hmm.
And so when we sold, we had to sell a client knowing that we were also the people who delivered, which made us so much more cautious in what we said and how we approached people. But it also made me realize I couldn't go in and talk to a director. You can't go talk to a manager or a VP. You had to talk to somebody at the C level because they were the only ones who had the checkbook
Yeah.
to write the check for an initiative of that size.
Hmm.
We had to also deliver. We had to prove that was the other piece of it. Big data was barely a thing in
Yeah.
2012, 2013, 2014. It started getting popular 2014, 2015. But we had to convince, and by we, I mean me, we had
Hmm.
to convince every single client that we could deliver value with data and with machine learning. And so
Yeah.
every single customer, it was a sale, like a hard sale, where we
Hmm.
had to sell the technology and then we had to very quickly deliver, or we got the contract canceled.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so we were always close
Hmm.
to the not only the selling of and the value proposition, but also the delivery
Hmm.
and delivering the value that they expected and keeping customers and clients happy. And it was really interesting. And again, kind of extending where my career began, where it was always close to the customer, always customer centric. It's forced me to deliver value with every client because if I didn't, I would never get another one.
Yeah.
Your reputation when you're a small business is one bad review is it.
Yeah.
And that's the end. So it for me it was different I think than most people's journey because I was always on the hook for something
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I couldn't promise more than I could deliver because I had to deliver it myself. I
Yeah.
couldn't hand it over to someone else. So it was, I hate to say it, but it was a more realism than most people get in their career. But it was good. It was really good for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, were you kind of getting repeat projects from the clients, or it was still kind of finding a new client every time? And then how did the kind of business grew from finding your first client to kind of having multiple clients?
Started word of mouth. Uh,
Mhm.
2012 was my first big client, led to my second one, led to my third one. And I would have one or two at a time because each one of the initiatives were big and small business. We can't really handle three, four, or five at a time.
Mhm.
So I would take one or two, and it really was one client would recommend me to another client, would recommend me to another client. And then I got on social media in 2014 and 2015.
Oh, okay,
And
interesting.
all of a sudden, that became my sales funnel. and I'd never had that kind of marketing power
Hmm.
before in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly, I had 4 calls a month, 5 calls a month, where it used to be, 1 call a quarter if I was lucky.
Okay. Interesting.
So it changed my sales funnel completely. That was sort of when the business took off, is after I got on social media, after that became part of the marketing for me. And I
Mhm.
didn't have to just rely on word of mouth anymore. I didn't have to go on these really aggressive sales calls and really struggle to close everyone.
Yeah.
They say most businesses don't survive that 3-year, 5-year. And for me, the pivot from, feast or famine to something sustainable
Mhm.
was getting a good sales funnel put together.
Oh, very interesting. And this was largely LinkedIn, or was there any other
Twitter.
Twitter?
I started
Okay.
on Twitter. Yeah, I actually didn't start on LinkedIn. I didn't know we could use LinkedIn for social media until 2017. Somebody from LinkedIn reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should try posting here." And I said, "Well, okay."
Hmm.
And now I'm really big on LinkedIn. Who
Oh,
knew?
interesting, interesting. And any particular, client which you remember from that time, any particular project, and then also, what do you think worked for you on Twitter and LinkedIn to kind of get this sales and marketing funnel going?
I'll be honest, in the first few years, I remember all of it and I remember none of it. It feels like a blur
Mhm.
going from that first client all the way up to 2015 where things started leveling out and I felt like I had control of the business versus just trying to, really being in survival mode. I
Mhm.
think the first couple of years for every business is, are
Yeah.
we going to make it next quarter? Are we in a
Which
you
one?
start saving money. Yeah,
Yeah.
you start saving money and you're like, okay, now I can not worry about next month. Now I can worry about next quarter. Then you save a little more and it's okay. Now I don't have to worry about this year. I can worry about next year. And there's a progression that you get to where there's some stability. So those first few years, and I got to say this to every entrepreneur, it's crazy, and
Yeah.
it always is. And don't worry, that's normal. That doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It just means you're running a normal business.
Correct.
And I think what made me successful on social media was talking to problems. I
Mhm.
also talked to C-level leaders, and there were very few people who talked about data analytics, machine learning to an executive audience, not just a technical audience, but also the executive audience.
Mhm.
And I also had a unique vision of how technically, what the technical capabilities were to become a data scientist who delivers value to the business.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I had a different voice, and that's what set me apart. Is there was reality behind it. And I
Mhm.
think that's always been my brand. Is I still work in the field. I still work as a consultant. I'm not a professional influencer or professional thought leader. And I
Correct.
think there's some benefit to having one foot in. I still have to deliver things,
Mhm.
and having another foot in talking about what I'm doing and explaining what I see that doesn't work, what I see that does work. What do I think are the capabilities that make a data scientist successful? What do I see as the capabilities that I think are a little overhyped? We don't really need that, or they don't provide as much value. So I think there's always been that pragmatism, and that's what worked for me. And
Correct.
still, I mean, to this day, that's really what I'm still doing, is just talking about what I do every day and explaining why I think some things work and why I think some of the problems that we see are still around, still
Mhm.
big.
Yeah, yeah. No, I must admit, I've always found your LinkedIn posts very, A, simple, B, to the point, and very practical. So clearly,
Thank you.
that stands out. So, uh, and during this journey, right? You start getting more, let's say, clients or calls. Uh, and then on one side, I'm presuming at the back it's still the same number of people delivering the project. So when did you kind of uh, put the accelerator on and then started kind of thinking, was there a transition point? Did it happen organically, or any particular point which you remember in this journey when you said that looks like I'm on to something, and probably scaling up was where I should focus on?
I've always had a hard cap where I didn't want to scale beyond a certain point. I
Hmm.
always said 25 people. That's the top. That is the
Okay.
most I will ever lead is 25.
Hmm.
In 2017, I actually spun off the R&D organization
Okay.
and it became its own separate unit and it's still running, but I don't run it anymore day to day. It
Hmm.
is a completely separate entity. And
Okay.
I did that because I was moving more towards the business, more towards the strategy side. And what I did at that point, it's interesting. You think about scaling as in I'm going to, do the same thing and make it bigger.
Hmm.
I've always thought of scaling as doing the next big thing and
Right.
moving on to the next opportunity.
Hmm.
What I saw was that companies needed teams built internally instead of consistently relying on outsourced talent.
Hmm.
They needed, I mean, there's always going to be an outsourced offshore, from the US's perspective, component to a business because you can't, well, you don't really need everything in house and internal.
Yeah.
But there are some core competencies. Anything that's a core competency for your business has to live inside of the business. And
Hmm.
that's the opportunity I saw is to help the business not only understand what data can do, how it's monetized, but also how to build the capabilities, how to build the organization. So that's where I started working towards and building towards.
Hmm.
That became, organizational development, it became product management, it became data and AI strategy. 2 years ago, I said, you know what? I've got to make a decision.
Hmm.
I'm either doing, what am I going to do? And that's where I pivoted towards, and I hate to say it this way, it was it was the most lucrative, pivoted towards data strategy and AI strategy and doing the product management.
Hmm.
Started doing seminars really in 2015, 2016, but those became a primary focus of the business a couple of years back. Now I open them up publicly. I used to do just private, only worked with clients and did seminars for them. Now it's opened up to a lot of really just my followers as well as people that are discovering data strategy, people that are discovering product management, realizing that this is a career track
Hmm. Hmm.
because data science has never had one.
No.
We've never had a career path or progression or advancement. You
Yeah.
just became a lead, and then you became a
Correct.
manager, and then you went, okay, now what?
Now what?
Or you became a principal or a staff or distinguished, and okay, so yeah, I've been doing this for 12 years now. What's next? What do I do after this? It's
Correct.
what what are you going to promote me to?
Yeah.
So there's now new roles, new career paths, and I've embraced training and teaching those because I guess I just did it earlier than everybody else did. So I have more experience with it. I've been able to work with multiple clients, multiple industries. And that's been, where I look at value creation coming from for me for probably the next 4 or 5 years, explaining how to make money with this
Hmm.
instead of how to continuously pay money for this. And so teaching and training, it's been an evolution. So instead of really scaling the business,
Hmm.
I've been sort of surfing opportunity to opportunity, leading edge waves, trying to stay in front of where the field is
Hmm.
and helping to explain to the people that are on the leading edge of it,
Yeah.
how do you do the more rigorous components of this field?
Wow. And during this period, how do you keep yourself up to date? How do you kind of zero in on what's coming next, and where would you want to focus?
Read more, listen to podcasts, smart people, listen to CEOs talk about this, not just tech CEOs, but normal companies,
Mm-hmm.
traditional industries. Listen to laggards. What do they sound like compared to companies that are succeeding?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of technical know-how, which is, the traditional, you read it, you get your hands in it, you build it, but there's also the strategic component of it. And part of strategy is forward looking, it's prescriptive.
Yeah.
I have to look at not what's happening today, but what's going to happen in 2 years, what's going to happen in 3 years,
Yeah.
which really means research, reading a lot of research,
Correct.
understanding kind of the difference between this research could be viable and this has got no future at all. This isn't ready for prime time, won't be ready anytime soon.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's eventually going to take me into learning more and more. I've been probably 6 years now learning about quantum computing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm probably maybe a couple of years away from understanding it completely, which
Okay.
tells you how much of a learning curve there
Uh,
is
yeah.
coming for a lot of us with quantum.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's where we go in maybe 5 to 7 years. We'll see quantum really have a huge impact on
Mm-hmm.
data science and machine learning. I've been learning about IoT forever because I knew that's a huge data generating
Yeah.
side of this, and that will open up new opportunities to gather data, but also we have to serve models and
Mm-hmm.
inference on those devices. How do you serve inference on a watch? How do you
Um,
serve inference on a heart rate monitor? How do you do any of that sort of, and it's really interesting to get into not only the strategic details but also the technical details. I
yeah.
love that sort of dichotomy, and it's really, you just every day have to set aside some time,
Mm-hmm.
read, you have to know where to source good material from, and you also have to have a really good filter.
Yeah. And any particular sources which you could recommend to kind of so what does your sources look like?
Papers with code. If you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for research, that's pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
Papers with code. I love it because there's no way to fake it.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work, well, it wouldn't make it onto papers with code. It
Correct.
because it wouldn't have any code. There wouldn't be
Yeah.
any sort of implementation to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read, the difference between like archive and papers with code, you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see the difference where on one side there's a whole lot of theory and potential, whether you're making progress in one direction. But
Mm-hmm.
then you look at papers of code and you go, oh, okay, so that's what's ready for prime time. And you get an idea of areas of interest for the research, but also areas of pragmatism
Mm-hmm.
where the technology is ready, the foundational components are ready, and it can be implemented. So I like sort of the back and forth between those two resources. Those are really high quality. I love LinkedIn. It gets a bad rap, but from a technical standpoint, there are some really smart people
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn. And the great thing about LinkedIn is you have to publish every day,
You have to. Yeah.
and you can be deceptive and fake your way through it for a good 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
After that, it gets really obvious. If you know what you're talking about, you just sort of fade into the background. If you don't know what you're talking about, you fade away. If you know what you're talking about, you
Mhm.
move to the front, and it becomes really obvious
Yeah.
who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't.
Who doesn't?
So I like LinkedIn because it forces you to sort of continuously prove you know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And if you stay relevant, it's a good indicator
Yeah.
that the content that you create is quality and that you have some expertise. So I like LinkedIn because I find people who are emerging and who are talking about areas of the field that I don't know anything about, who are
Mm-hmm.
explaining their perception on where the field goes and what capabilities, but they also share resources.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when they share a third party resource, it's good. That's the great thing about it, is their filter sort of helps you figure out what you should be reading, because there's no one
One.
periodical that has everything that you need. And so you
Okay.
sort of discover, as you go. Whereas back when you and I were starting, there were only what, four, four resources, and that was it.
Yeah. Those are peaceful times.
Yep, it
Yeah.
was easy.
It was easy. That is true. And a lot of what you mentioned is technical sources and content. So then, how do you take them and filter them to apply to the problems and the challenges which, for example, the CXOs are mentioning to you?
I always give it a 3 week.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everything that survives 3 weeks has some legs to it. If it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be disproven, if it's going to be shown to be, not useful, usually within 3 weeks, somebody comes forward and says that's trash. So, step one, never do anything day one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But also, I tell clients this a lot. If you can't point to an implementation in the real world, don't be the first one. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not Meta. Don't do it. Don't
Right.
be the first one to the metaverse. That's not going to be you. That's not your wheelhouse.
Right.
Wait until it is proven and you can point to implementations to say this works.
Mm-hmm.
It's like self-driving cars. You can look at from a functional standpoint.
Yeah.
and very clearly say it works up to this point right here, and it starts having a very hard time right
Post.
here.
Yeah.
Everything after that that people are promising, probably hype. You look
Yeah.
at robotics, you can look at Boston Dynamics and what the Boston Dynamics robots are able to do. And
Yeah.
that's a really good indication of that's about the leading edge.
Yeah.
But are any businesses using those robots? Oh, okay. So it works, but we haven't figured out how to operationalize it. We haven't figured out how to productize it. We haven't figured out how to integrate it into the rest of the business. Okay. So there's an opportunity, the technology works, but we're figuring out the other parts of it. And that's really how I advise and how I work with technologies is
Mhm.
until I see something tangible,
Yeah.
I'm not going to build with it myself because I'm not smart enough to be the person that does, the cutting edge, first of its kind implementation. I'm not that smart. There are people way smarter than me in
Mhm.
this field who can do that sort of thing, who are first to market. I don't I'm not going to build generation 1. I'm going to build generation 3, and
Mhm.
I'm going to build it so that it can be monetized. That's really what I understand. So I'm in
Mhm.
a different place than a lot of people in our field. So I look for implementations, for pragmatic examples, then I'll build. And what
Mhm.
you find is that you can be first to market
Yeah.
even if you're dealing with, the third generation of technology because you're just the first one to apply it to solve a different kind of business problem. And vision becomes part of, especially when you get to the principal or staff level, having a little bit of a vision where you say, this is all this technology has been used for so far, but I see the potential for a different application. I think this can solve some problems our business has.
Mhm.
That's valuable, and we overlook that sometimes. It's a different type of innovation, but it's extremely valuable to the business. And so
Yeah.
that's my process is I want to see things work. I
Mhm.
want to see things that are proven, and then I want to bring a different approach to it or bring it to a different problem.
Mhm.
And you can deliver a lot of value that way.
Yeah, yeah. And how does a typical engagement for you look like? Because you focus mostly on AI strategy as of now, and then if you're defining the strategy, you can't really say that here is a 2 month project or here is a problem, a specific problem I want to solve. So I mean, how does a typical engagement look like? What does a life cycle of a project look like for you?
I used to be able to tell you what that was. Now I am primarily an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get brought in by a company who had spent a lot of money on
Mm-hmm.
the data team and on the infrastructure, and they weren't getting there was nothing on the other side of the equation. There
Mm-hmm.
was no ROI. And so
Okay.
someone would bring me in and they would say, okay, what are we doing wrong? Who do we need to hire? And I would say, whoa, it's not there. Problem's actually earlier. Let's talk about strategy. Why do we use data? Why do we use analytics? How does that create and deliver value to customers for this particular business? And that's how I would start a strategy engagement. Now it's really different.
Mm-hmm.
I get brought in mostly by clients I've either had in the past or people that I've worked with before at a different company. They'll
Mm-hmm.
bring me in and I sit in on a ton of phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
I get brought in to answer questions. I send emails where I explain technical constructs in terms of how could you make money with this. Apple's last big event, I sent out an entire newsletter to a bunch of CXOs who are all clients and who all have me really on to do that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
where I just explain what does all this stuff mean for you? What
And
does it
this
mean
was
for
the
your
vision,
business?
right? This was the
What's
vision.
that? Yeah.
This was the Vision Pro event which you mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, just explaining what does this mean?
Mm.
When they say there's Apple Silicon, what is Apple Silicon? What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does any of this, when they announce their new iPhone and their new watch, I said, watch it, the big thing that they just showed you in this event isn't anything you're staring at. It's their silicon.
Yeah.
They're able to run inference on a watch. What does that mean? It means the IoT is ready. The
Yeah.
IoT is now going to, in the next 2 years, probably sooner, have a chat GPT moment where we can run inference on small devices.
Yeah.
That is something you need to be thinking about for your business. What would it mean to run a model
Mhm.
on a watch? What would it mean to run a model? Pick any sensor you have anywhere in your business, or any sensor you deliver to your customers, or where on your platform could sensors fit? And then put a model on top of that. How would that change your business? And so those are the types of answers that I provide. Basically, I ask the question and then I help answer it for them.
Mhm.
And you can see I'm doing two things. Number one, I'm providing perspective and helping them ask the right questions. And then I'm talking about how do you turn this from a technology story to a value story, to a monetization story? What does this mean in terms of your business? What are you going to use this for? What, you see Elon Musk running around the stage with a robot. Is
Mhm.
that going to happen? No, no, that's not going to happen. But we totally miss the watch. You look at that watch and you're like, oh, that's a cool watch. And then, you're looking at the iPhone. No, that small presentation, that little slide they did where they showed you the chip right underneath the screen, that's a big deal. And it's those things that we miss. And so that's a typical engagement. It doesn't sound like work, does it? Sitting
No.
there through an Apple event and parsing through
Mhm.
and then explaining what it means and how you're going to make money with it. That doesn't sound like work, but that's my job. And it is a really big value creator because C-level leaders, one, don't have time, two, that's not their domain.
Mhm.
And I've found a niche here. And like I said, it doesn't look like what I've done in the past, but it is a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Interesting. And the same thing, what was your, aha moment on generative AI and chat GPT? And then I'm presuming you would have done a similar exercise when that came out, or probably earlier, because, to the practitioners, it was kind of in the making for some time.
I pitched a CEO on GPT in 2019. Yeah, it was 2019.
Mhm.
And they said no. And it was one of my moments of, it was a learning moment for me because it wasn't the CEO's fault, it was mine. I didn't present it well. I didn't
True.
explain the paradigm of what can you do with this technology. And if I'd have explained it better, if I'd have been preparing the CEO in advance instead of just dropping it on them,
Mhm.
I would have been more successful. It would have been and so we all make the same mistakes. We all learn the same hard lessons. And for me, that was, but you saw it coming. I mean, in 2019, I think almost all of us saw where it was going. I don't think any of us saw ChatGPT doing what it did, but I think we all knew what
Yeah.
generative models were going to eventually enable. So,
Correct.
it's not like I'm some swami.
Yeah.
It's really, if you understand the technology, if you build with it a little bit, you kind of go, oh yeah, no, I do. Whoa, this is going to be huge. Tomorrow, no, it doesn't work real well.
Yeah.
But eventually, we're going to go down this road. It's going to work,
Correct.
and we will have a huge disruptive moment. So and it's interesting that there's two sides to it. It's not enough to just have the vision. That's what I realized in 2019. It's
Mhm.
not enough to just know what's going to happen. You have to be able to convince the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's preparing versus springing it on them and saying, oh, you know what I can do today? No, we can't do that. We have to be preparing them years in advance so that when the technology hits, they're ready for it. And they've been getting ready for it. It's a different thing that I do now. Very interesting. And it's a lot of result of mistakes as much
And,
as
and
insights.
it's very fascinating. So instead of kind of focusing on what you can deliver for them today, you're
Mhm.
prepping them up for the future. And it's yeah, I haven't seen many people kind of take that approach. So clearly, it's a niche, and it's something extremely valuable. So great.
And
And
it's fun too. I love it.
I'm
It's
sure.
just too much fun.
Correct. And during this period, you also authored a book. How did that happen? And then, did you kind of wanted to be author even before? So tell us what happened.
I was avoiding a book. I wasn't ready to write a book. And then I guess before I really thought about it consciously, but I'd been, I'd had enough material, and Wiley approaches me right around this time last year. It was the end of October, early November.
Mhm.
They approached me. They said, "Have you thought about writing a book?" And it was just one of those perfect timing things where I said, "Yeah, no, I haven't, but yeah, yeah, I
Mhm.
think I could. I have most of this stuff written." And so started writing it at the end of November, beginning of December, finished it in March. And of course, some things happened between December, December of last year and March.
Yeah,
So I had to keep writing the book over and over again to
yeah,
include different parts of what was happening, what was developing. I had to write part of the book as if I was writing it in July, even
yeah.
though the last thing I wrote was the middle of March. So
March.
I had to write some of it, sort of looking through a crystal ball and explaining what was coming. And it was a great experience.
Mhm.
I don't recommend it. It's like erasing your life. You
Yeah,
just kind of put your life on hold for a good few months.
correct.
It hardest thing I've ever done. I'm glad I did it. The response has been interesting. A
Yeah.
lot of response that I did not expect.
Mhm, mhm.
On one side, technical practitioners I've had some people say, "This book is total garbage.
Oh,
This is an absolutely terrible book." And it's because it was written for strategy. It was
yeah,
written for monetization. And there, you read a data science book, you're expecting code, you're expecting implementations, you're expecting tell me what to do, and strategy is different.
yeah, yeah.
Strategy is that thesis of why. So on one side, people have kind of gone, "Oh, I don't like this book so much."
Mhm,
But the interesting thing is there is a huge audience in different parts of the business that has adopted it that I didn't expect. I've had
mhm,
sales teams pick it up and use it as, how do I sell data products? How do I sell analytics products? How do I
mhm.
sell cloud? I mean, it's been popular with salespeople because it helps you understand the paradigm and how to
Yeah.
frame it so you can sell it to C-level leaders. It has
Mhm,
been really popular with CXOs, CDOs, especially,
mhm.
who have I've had a bunch of them reach out to me and say, this is what I've needed from a perspective standpoint.
Mm.
And there are an increasing number of technical practitioners who are looking to make a transition to something else. And they're picking up my book and they're saying, "Oh, oh, we've been missing this.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been doing some of this and I
Yeah.
didn't realize that's not my job."
Mhm.
Oh, and I think we do that to data scientists a lot. We
Yeah.
ask them to do things that they aren't experts in strategy. They aren't experts in product. And we keep asking them to do stuff that they're not great at.
Yeah.
And we put them in really bad positions. And so the book's been interesting. It's been reacted to really, really well, but on the other side, also really, really negatively. So unexpected journey, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a good learning process for me.
Mhm.
And I think the book's finally found its niche with people that are looking for, how do I create value with this? Not just how do I deliver more technology?
Yeah, yeah. No, I always find this, someone writing a book as a tremendous commitment. And then, you mentioned that you thought you had things written at the start of the book, but then you have to go through the iterations to kind of bring out the value. And I think timing wise, you chose the period which was probably the most happening period in the history of AI. So
Best and worst timing.
that is true. That is true. Great. So when shifting the focus to what next for you, and then what do you feel most excited about in the next few years?
I think the field has to grow up,
Hmm.
and I'm excited to watch that happen because
Hmm.
I've been through it sort of myself. My
Yeah.
business had to grow up, my online presence has had to grow up, my presentation style has had to grow. I had to grow up from being sort of a traditional engineer techie to being able to work with CXOs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now that we have more people in the field who are breaking the 10-year barrier, who have over 10 years of experience. It used to be, I think it was 2% of the field or something like that had
Yeah.
over 10 years of experience.
Yeah.
And now we're slowly getting to the point where we have actual senior. data scientists. We have people who have leadership experience now too, who are in data science, who have had, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years of leadership. Now we're growing up and we're sort of forcing ourselves to do all of the work. And I'm excited about that because data science is one of the few fields where we could live up to the hype. The
Yeah.
hype's ridiculous, but we can actually deliver. It works.
Yeah.
And it actually does what we say it does,
And
which
it's
is it's kind of
effective.
wild, isn't it?
It is. It is. That's so true. And uh, you mentioned that a lot of people are transitioning, and that's one of the areas you. So, any advice you have for people like those? Let's say someone who's been 10 years on the technical side, and then obviously at some point you face this heat that you're great technically, but so what? Where, what can I do with that,
Yes.
right? So for
Yep.
people in that area, what would be your advice to them?
Well, first, don't be afraid of it. It's normal. Every technical field goes through this. It's not like it's just data science. If you
Mhm.
talk to somebody who's in software engineering, hardware engineering, everything, everyone goes through this same. What do you mean my technical skills don't get me any further? Wait, what? What do you mean? I have to learn something completely different? But I've spent the last 10, 15 years getting really good at technology. And it's very important. So biggest piece of advice is don't, when you get really good at something,
Mhm.
don't think that your problem is you don't know enough and so you're going to go and learn other fields and other stuff. Don't. You're good. You're good at what you do. Keep being good at what you do. But realize that learning another technology just makes you incrementally more valuable. And in order to get to principal staff or in order to make the transition into a different role, you have to learn multiplier skills.
Mhm.
And that means that you improve the team, you improve the organization. So by you being there and doing what you do, your effort is multiplied. 1 hour of your time makes everyone in the organization more productive. So you multiply by training, by upskilling, by mentoring, by not just doing it yourself, but teaching everyone else and bringing everyone else up with you. You do that as, like I said, principal, staff, distinguished. You do that as a leader. You do that if you go into the product direction. You do that if you go into the CXO direction. You do that if you go into the strategy direction. You do that. So the real secret here is to figure out when you've hit that technical plateau
Mhm.
and to stop focusing on individual technical skills that make you more productive and start developing your capabilities that multiply and that make you a multiplier and help you make everyone around you better.
Mhm.
That's when you're sort of ready to make that transition. But you'll also find you start getting bored.
Mhm.
And when you get bored, that's the first sign. Don't just job hop.
Mhm.
If you think everyone around you is incompetent, don't just job hop. It won't fix the problem.
Mhm.
Begin to figure out how to make everyone else around you better. That
Interesting.
will be the next sort of jump in your career, but it'll also keep you passionate about what you do because now it's not just about you and what you deliver, it's you getting excited about what everyone else is doing
Yeah.
and helping everyone else. And that's another, like I said, that's another sort of growth phase. And you'll like that. It will give you that passion back. So
Yeah.
if you're feeling sort of trapped, bored, tired, look at becoming a multiplier because it'll bring your spark back.
Great, great. No, thanks for sharing that advice. And I think a lot of people should relate to that because the first 10 years get defined by how good you are technically, but then when you start hitting the wall, that is when you struggle to find where to head next. So thanks a lot for sharing that. Uh, just in the last few minutes, when I just want to open up a rapid fire round. So, just a few questions, and then what I want to hear is the first thought which comes to your mind. And the idea is to just get to know you better as a person. So, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. And audiobooks, physical books, podcasts. What's your source of? Uh,
I like all three. And I think it's different. With technical books, I need physical.
mm-hmm,
With more theory, I like the Audible because I can hit pause and just think. There's something else about not having my hands on something that
mm-hmm,
allows me to work with ideas better. And podcasts, love hearing people's perspectives.
mm-hmm.
So I may understand the idea really well, but the podcast gives me their background, their thoughts, their thinking, and you can assimilate the best parts of the smart people that you listen to on podcasts. So they're all good.
Okay, interesting. And on reflection, is it PowerPoint, note, pen and paper?
Oh yeah, pen and paper. I got
Yeah, great.
and pencil. I'm
And pen.
still old school. Still that
Okay.
old school engineer. I got a pencil.
Well, I am a fountain pen. I
Yep.
don't know whether you can see this.
Yep. No, I can see it. That's a good pen. That's a nice pen.
Yeah,
Wow, that's good.
great. Uh, Typical weekend, what does it look like?
I get to teach on weekends.
Mhm.
So I teach a product strategy class on Saturday mornings. But before that, donut day, very important to have some donuts. And
Okay.
then spend the rest of the day Saturday, rest of the day Sunday with the family. Just
Okay.
whatever they want to do.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's an escape room. Sometimes I'm taking my daughter to play video games. It's movies. It's all over the place. It's whatever she's interested in, whatever my wife Erin's interested in.
Mhm.
Trying to just keep as connected to family as possible.
Okay. And any particular books which you reread or recommend to people?
Hmm. I'm into a lot of strategy books right now.
Mm.
So one of the non-traditional ones, On War, great book, really explores the overlap between military strategy and cultural
Mhm.
strategy. Talks about
Yeah.
how culture drives conflict
Mhm.
and culture also drives resolution to conflict. I love that book. It's by Carl von Clausewitz. Good
Okay.
strategy book. I
Mhm.
loved reading it. Obviously, Joe Reese and Matt Housley's book. It's the data engineering Bible. So if you're looking for a more technical read, they've got a great one. Eddie
Mhm.
Pollock's got a great book. There's tons of really good technical books out right now. So it's hard to just call one out and
That's
say read that book. I could probably spend the next 10 minutes talking about books
fine.
as far as those. Annie Duke's got a good book called Quit. Great book. Really good decision framework.
Mhm. And what is it about? Quit?
It's about quitting. It
Okay.
is all about why you have to quit in order to make space to do something new. If you
Wow.
don't quit, you don't stop doing the harmful things. And
Right.
especially when you're talking about people hitting that senior plateau, if you
Mhm.
don't quit learning new technical skills, you don't have space to learn those multiplier skills.
Right.
So quitting gets a bad rap, but you have to make space to grow.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thanks a lot. Really, ton of insights and ton of experience. Like I said, I can almost relate to your LinkedIn posts and the posts I've seen. So very practical. Very, I feel through the discussion, people can take advice and then just implement it. So thanks a lot for sharing all that perspective.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.